Hello. This video is going to be the first part of what I think is going to be a few videos going through research papers, research methods, and research components. Um, a lot of this is probably going to be review, but I don't care. I want you all to be on the same page. Um, if you had me for English 100, this is going to be review, definitely. But you guys who did have me for English 100 have a little bit of an advantage because you know what my expectations are when it comes to a research paper. Um, for those of you who did not have me for English 100, it's important that you pay attention to this because you need to understand what my expectations are for the research paper. Okay, so just to introduce a research paper, you all know this, but there's something in the definition of a research paper I really want you to think about. And a research paper is a body of original student work intended to explore a concept or argue a point, both relying heavily on research. Often the concepts or points relate to a new interpretation of the idea. Okay. One thing I want to point out is that it is a body of original student work. It's not just regurgitating somebody else's work and putting it in your own words. That's what a lot of students think a research paper is, but that's not what a research paper is. You are presenting a unique argument or a unique exploration of a topic. So it must be original. And whenever you begin your, uh, you know, work on conceptualizing your, well, you should already have a topic in mind, but you're going to be fine-tuning it this week. And it's important for you to keep in mind that must be a body of original work, and that it must argue a unique. It must either argue a unique point or explore a concept in a unique way. And that leads into informational research paper versus an argumentative research paper. I'm not forcing you to do one or the other of these. Do whatever you want, but you need to understand the difference. An informational research paper is exploring a concept, providing information to the reader. You want the reader to learn something at the end of the paper. An argumentative research paper, you're arguing a point. You're trying to persuade the reader to believe you at the end of the research paper, to believe the argument that you are posing. Now, most research papers that you're going to write in college may be a combination of the two. The paper that you might write in this class might be a combination of the two. You know, and that's fine. You don't have to do one or the other. I just want a research paper. So, you know, in an argumentative research paper, you have to provide the context for that argument. So you have to give us the information to help us understand the issue, the topic, before you argue your point. So all argumentative papers have an informational component to them. But, you know, you could just be providing us with information and exploring a concept, exploring your topic. So your paper might be all informational. That's fine. But I want you to know what the difference is, and I want you to really understand what a research paper is. Narrowing your topics. Always restrict your research question to meet the length of the paper you can write. Don't try to tackle a huge topic and explore a huge body of knowledge. You know, some students will give me a thesis statement, and when I think about it, you know, people write dissertations about some of these topics. So you need to narrow your topic down so that it's manageable within the length requirements of the paper. So say you want to explore F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing process. He had a relatively long career, so you might want to focus that on a period of his work, or maybe just his process on The Great Gatsby. Or maybe you just want to explore Fitzgerald's literary legacy. Maybe you'll just focus that on the legacy of The Great Gatsby. However you need to restrict it so that you're not overburdened with information. All right, so thesis statements. It's important to think of a thesis statement as you're taking an old idea and then presenting a new idea within the context of the old idea. So the new idea is what is being proposed. And the old idea is what you are assuming your audience knows before your new idea is presented. So you have to make assumptions of your audience's knowledge. Say you're picking an obscure writer to do your research paper on. We might not know anything about that writer. So you might have to assume that we don't know much about it. Um, and then your thesis statement should actually be constructed in that it provides the relationship between the old idea and the new idea. I should have an example on the next slide. So it's specifically stated in the thesis statement, and the rest of the paper is structured to connect these two ideas. Okay, here I have some examples here. So the thesis statement purpose is that it's the spine of your paper and imposes your main point in a single sentence. And in doing so, it presents the new idea most powerfully from the standpoint of the old idea. So here's an example. So the new idea, and this doesn't necessarily relate to your research paper, but this is a good example. The new idea is that the American government no longer needs a president. The old idea is that America does need a president. So if we just look at the new idea, framed within this context, we can assume that the old idea is that America does need a president. So even though it's not necessarily written out, it is the context of the old ideas here. And then all points or arguments are meant to serve the thesis statement. Here are some resources on thesis statements, but in the next module, I want you to review the research paper resources at Purdue OWL, and this stuff is going to be there. So your thesis statement should be narrow and focused, not broad and vague. I often tell students to preface their thesis statement with, my paper suggests that blank. It's a cognitive trick to get you thinking about how to boil down your paper in a concise way. But don't actually write that my paper suggests that ever. Don't actually ever leave that in. But that might be a good cognitive tool to help you do it, to figure out what your thesis statement is. Everything in the paper will support your thesis statement. If any material does not support your thesis statement, it does not belong in your paper. And all essays have a thesis statement in some form. Technically, all writing does. I mean, even at a subconscious level, when you write a short story, there's probably a thesis statement of some kind. There's some kind of statement within that that kind of sums up the main themes of the story. Then here are 5 organizational methods. The 5 different organizational methods for organizing your research paper. Story arc, cause and effect. Oh, my graphics all messed up. I don't know why. There should be an E right here, but it's behind it. Compare and contrast, problem and solution, and then sequence. And here is the definitions for each of these story arcs. This week we discussed structure and manipulating structure. This is kind of the same idea, but this is specifically for research papers. So the story arc structure marks the beginning and end of an experience. This is basically like a narrative arc. Okay. Cause and effect is the next one listed here, and it gives an objective correlation between what happened and why. So in the context of this research paper, you might want to explore, maybe there's an event or a pattern of behaviors in a writer's life that causes them to create in a certain way. It informs their creative process in some way. Or maybe there's a cause and effect relationship with the success of the book. I know one student is going to write about the success of Dan Brown's novels. So there's a definite cause and effect relationship there. Compare and contrast, this is, just identifying the differences between 2 or more things. Problem solution, this is typically, this isn't something you would use for this paper, but in a lot of argumentative papers, problem and solution is the organizational method used, where you present the problem and then you argue that your solution is the best one. And then sequence, this is very similar to story arc, but it's Story arc specifically marks the beginning and end of an experience. Sequence is just putting the every you're all going to use sequence. Sometimes you might use multiple different organizational methods. You will always use sequence. You're going to order your points, your arguments, your research in some kind of order, chronologically, reverse chronologically, inside out or outside in, top down, bottom up, smallest to biggest, biggest to smallest. There's going to be a sequence regardless. And then you'll probably use one of these other three over here. Choosing an organizational method. This depends entirely on your subject, audience, and purpose. So what your topic is, who the audience is, and what you want the audience to learn or believe at the end of it. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. It may be beneficial for you to deconstruct your idea, find the points that need to be made, make an outline, and decide how the information can be most powerfully conveyed. And this may take some trial and error. So deconstructing your idea. This is an activity that if you feel like you're getting stuck, you should do. So, think about, conceptualize, what is your new idea? What is the point or concept you're exploring or arguing for? Okay, what is the old idea? Going back to structure and story and plot, think about stasis theory. So, you could think of your new idea as it's the new place of stasis, and the old idea is the beginning place of state of stasis. So, what changes over the narrative arc of your story? What is the link between the old idea and the new idea? This will most likely determine your organizational method, and then what points are needed to get from the old idea to the new. So, think of old idea, point 1, point 2, point 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and eventually you get to the new idea. This will help you figure out the organizational method. Alright, this is the last thing we're going to discuss in this video, and then we'll go on to part 2. The 5-paragraph paper. You were probably all taught this in high school. Your first paragraph introduces the topic as the thesis statement. And then you have your first point in a paragraph, your second point in a paragraph, your third point in a paragraph, and then you wrap it up. You're all taught this because it's the standardized way to quantify writing. But that doesn't mean that it's effective writing. It's fundamentally flawed in that whenever you're writing anything, you need to keep the audience, author, and purpose. Audience and purpose in mind, definitely. But if you need to truthfully approach writing. You need to write what needs to be written, and it needs to be organized and structured in the way that it needs to be organized to be the most effective. Again, writing's communication and its manipulation, and you need it to be as effective as possible. So you might, hypothetically, you might only have 2 points that you need to make to get from the old idea to the new idea, or you might have 17. That's how you need to structure it. Don't force your paper to fit within this 5-paragraph model. It's fundamentally flawed because it limits what you can do and what you can accomplish in your writing. And the 5-paragraph paper is basically an average paper. It's a C paper, so don't do it. Make it original, make it unique, make it your own. Okay. Remember, you're exploring a unique concept or arguing a unique point. And for something to be unique, you need to have the freedom to make it unique and creative.